Well, I hope you don't watch the television later because it's appears I'm going to be on Meridian. Anyway, we're back. Much more important. We're here with the ring. Oh my word! Look now, we've got some of the big glamour boys coming on. Here's the Howard brothers with renown. You see the name of the original owner there, John Murphy's Proud Peacocks. He had a pair of engines, exactly the same, painted blue, which is really an unusual colour for engines, or was in that time of day anyway. And he was from up Newcastle on Tyne, I think, somewhere in that part of the world. Bought these two engines to work with his ride. He didn't go much on twisted brass and decorations, and indeed you'll notice on the front of the Renown it says plain but powerful. And that engine is in cracking working order. It regularly drives their old-time fair. Believe it or not, a few years ago that engine was in a disastrous fire and was reduced. Everything that would burn on it was burnt. The rubber on the wheels, the canopy, all that. It was reduced to just a bare shell. And the Howard boys told the fire brigade, whatever you do, let the place burn, but keep playing water on the engine to stop it getting too hot. And so the critical bits of the engine actually survived the fire, and they started rebuilding. And I remember it appearing at Great Dorset Steam Fair. It was no means complete. In fact, it was a long way from complete, but it was on its wheels, it was running, and it was moving itself. And a lot of us looked at it and shed a tear, because it was almost like somebody coming back from the dead. So there it is today, as you can see, absolutely immaculate. There was a lad up on the roof there this morning when I was having my breakfast, on his hands and knees cleaning the roof. That's the way they work and look after that engine. So a beautiful sight. There's Paul with another customer. So say if you've got any youngsters that want to have a go, keep your eye on Paul in the white shirt, and he will sort you out accordingly. Paul's engine is the little showman's that's standing in the middle at the moment, along with John Derling's Aveling. That little Aveling, as I say, you notice the rampant horse on the front, and the motto down on the bottom of the smoke box door in Victor, which stands for Undaunted, the Latin scholars tell me. That engine has just been subject to a major rebuild. And there are not many Wallises that have survived, and I think we've actually got 4 Wallises here at the Do, which is quite an unusual quantity. This engine belonged to Tony Harrington for many years. Tony was a vet, which is an unusual occupation to have connected with an engine. But he owned Pedler, restored it, got it going. Unfortunately, he was involved in an accident and lost his life. And the family have kept the engine going for a couple of years now, but they've decided the time has come to part with it. So if you want a nice agricultural engine in good working order, there's one that's now available for sale. Little Fowler just gone past. That's Enterprise, recently rebuilt, owned by the Patch family. Now that's a Fowler A4. We had that at the Bath and West show a couple of weeks ago, working very well on a saw bench there. And we've got quite an interesting selection of Fowler agriculturals, and if I remember to tell you, I'll explain which model's which. I'll probably get some of them wrong, but don't worry about that, because the owners will beetle over and put me right with the greatest of pleasure. So we've got A4s, we've got 8s, and we've got 9s that I know of. All at the same different sizes. An A4, you see there just heading away from the box. It doesn't look a particularly big engine, but actually, let it run over your toe and see what you think of it there. But it is the smaller end of the Fowler agricultural. Fowler roller coming around next. You'll see on the front there above the registration plate the brass plaque, which is known as the Fowler Owls, OWLS, the birds. And that in fact is the Leeds City crest. And Fowlers were in Leeds and they adopted that crest. And if you've got a genuine Fowler Owls plate like that, they're actually worth a bit of money today because people like them. I mean, you can find somebody who's willing to polish brass when you have it around. How old are you got now? They would simply wind this spike down, drive along, back up, move over a little bit, and wind it down again, and rip the whole road up, and then roll it back down. If only we could do that today, life would be a bit simpler, but we wouldn't really want to be driving around on stone roads. Well, here's Margaret coming quietly round, again with a fairly youthful driver. We used to call the steersman youthful many years ago, but he's grown up now, well, sort of. But if you look at Richard's steering, you'll notice that he's pulling the steering round to the right, but the engine is going left. That's a classic what's called tank steering of the very, very old engines like that, where the steering works back to front. And it's very direct. Under the steering wheel there's a little handle you can see there, and that's the steering brake. You keep that on when you're not trying to turn it, because if you don't and it catches a pothole, you'll find yourself standing on the footplate next to the driver with very sore shins as you mark those as you've gone over the top. So, the young man there, who I think has probably been on the regulator before, because he's looking pretty confident there. Left hand on the regulator, right hand on the reversing lever. The reversing lever, that's the big upright lever you can see. He's just let go of it. Now he's got hold again now. That's the one that decides whether the engine will go forwards or backwards. So you select that, and then you open the regulator, which he's got his other hand on, and that allows steam to the cylinder. And according to how you set the valve, which is what the upright lever does, you'll either go forwards or backwards. Another Wallis coming round now, Wallis expansion engine. Now, this was a unique feature of Wallis's, the expansion gear, known very often in the hobby as the expanding engine, but it's actually correctly the expansion engine. And it was the way they governed the engine, because they argued it made the engine more economical when it was working on the governors. Renown coming back again, John Murphy, South Shields, that's where he came from, and you get a very good opportunity to see the Fowler crest on the side of the belly tank between the wheels as she comes round. The little Garrett, which is coming round now, the showman's tractor, you'll spot on the front it has the Garrett name, and what is actually often called the Garrett Greyhound, but in fact it isn't a Greyhound. I think it's supposed to be a cheetah or something of that sort. I can't remember now. I wish I hadn't started that story actually, because I dug myself a hole. They were known as the Greyhound tractor quite commonly, but it's incorrectly named because it's not a Greyhound. But the Garretts built this particular size of engine. Most of them, of course, didn't come with the dynamo and the fancy decorations. They were just plain haulage tractors, like the little Aveling that's just gone past. but they were a little bit bigger and heavier than a lot of the other mates. What Paul, as a photo, the lioness, thank you very much. Yeah, I wish I hadn't started that story, but it's not a greyhound, it's a lioness. So that's from the owner, so he'll know. There's this nice little fowler coming round again. This has just been subject of a major rebuild. Quite a few of these engines have recently been subject of major boiler work. It's quite interesting to think how our hobby has helped industry and employment. When I first got interested in the 1960s, there was only one boiler maker you could go to get an engine repaired. I now reckon to be something like 30 boiler makers or engine repairers around the country. So, in the table you'll see here is a haulage engine belonging to John and Caroline Lambert. This is up from Bridport. Clyde started life with a very unglamorous job. It worked for the War Department, and it did 3 trips a day with 3 trailers of horsemuck from the stables at Aldershot. And that's what it was employed to do. I don't think they ever used it within its capabilities, because it's a pretty big, useful, powerful road loco. Now, I've mentioned road locos. They usually have springs. They usually have 3 speeds, and they nearly always have a belly tank. That's the extra water supply carried in that square box. Are we ready, men? Well, half and half I will be proud of that, because he's gone off like hellfire. Take your toe on. This is just what the Daily Mirror would have wanted. Just goes to show what you can do with Tony's toe when you put too much on it. Because he's coming straight towards me. We're away. Well, Eileen made a cracking start there. Of course, we're not racing for real, you know. Just tackle that always drives off like that. Now, are we turning or coming back backwards? Downwind of the engine, you'll find yourself covered in little black spots. Anyway, the marshal code comfortably first, so then he's keeping history alive. Just coming nicely back. And one of the downsides of driving a big showman's engine is you can't see in front of you very well. So it's a classic case of teamwork. Well, I think Walton was determined they're going to win this. this one. Just bear in mind that there's only like an inch of spring on that engine, on both of them. So it doesn't do a lot of good out of the you can't have a lot of travel on the spring for the simple reason that if you did, when it's back, it would come out of there, won't it? And you'd lose your drive. Right, and I think we're away. Aveling was caught with his back in the wrong place. He didn't want to go, so he had to do a little jiggle. Aveling giving him a good start. Predicted the two burrows are coming back into the fastest, which is a bit of a non-event in a way because they both have an extra gear, of course. Now you see a nice turn of speed there. Well, the little Wallis is away again for his second run. I think they're going up and out the far end, though. That's the plan. Here's the Garrett coming back again. I say an engine not geared for flat out speed, geared for heavy hauling. They were a very good engine. If you look at that as it goes up, comparing with the Burrell and the Aveling, it's just turned that thing heavier and stronger, which is why they were favoured by the timbermen and the showmen. For hauling work. They also carried more wire rope, which is very useful for timbermen because of course they will get the engine down there and try to push out. Both goes down, very good. For Wiltshire in the 1960s, and attended many of the Appleford rallies and everything, that even went to Germany on a promotional tour in 1976. That was Chris. They sold it, but Chris bought it back and it's been rebuilt with boiler work being done, paint work being done, and really a lovely little showman's tractor. It's for the side shows. It's not the main ride, providing lighting, stalls and putting a living there. Following on that, we have a Fowler agriculture called Dreadnought. Now, John Ansell, you may see him driving it, well-known haulier, moved many steam locomotives. He's had this engine since the 1960s, and it's recently had a lot of renovation work. I think it's had a new firebox, a bit of repainting, and it's the same owner on it over 60 years later.
sawing and thrashing. Mainly thrashing, from farm to farm, because most farmers didn't have their own equipment, so they hired in contractors to do the work. The next engine is a Wiltshire engine. No, sorry, I apologise. The next engine is Endurance, which belonged to the Oxfordshire Company. And it wasn't sold off until 1949 from their auction. So then it's got a PW registration, and the Langley family have owned this for many, many years, and it's only recently been completely rebuilt. And they've even got a lady at the helm. We're not being sexist, she's doing a lovely job. Following off that was a Wiltshire engine, this is called Farmer's Friend. I can remember this came all the way from Devon in 1975 to celebrate 21 years of the National Tractor Engine Club, now called the National Tractor Club. But they drove all the way from Devon to take part in the road run which went from Nettlebed back here to Appleford. Following on from that, we have an Aveling road engine. Aveling road engines are not that common. They're not of them were sent overseas for export. It's sterling road engines. It's sort of Cornish registration. And I think it did work late 1940, but I think there may be only one more of these existing still. But this, for many years in the Thames Valley with Mr. Hyatt, and we can all remember it in Appleford and Knowlton and all the other rallies.
If you buy the rest of the magazine, you get bitchy messages. It's a subscription. First issue £1.99, second issue £159.
Which relates to Steve Neville. Steve Neville, to any audio maker, was a man of great character. When he bought this engine, he just went to it, filled it up with water, got some coal and drove it home, not knowing whether it was any good or not, and obviously it was. It didn't have benefits to the tank that was running into the boiler. It used my ornament road for dredging, diving, large rivers. Then went to Anthony Hill, who's another a great character in the Thames Valley. Before by the Snow family in the late 1980s. The early 1990s. I think it was one of the largest type of trains originally built to haul guns in the Second World War. Actually, the War Department ordered 55 road engines, 53 of them like this with what we call 10 nominal horsepower. It's probably the largest type of road engine we've ever seen. When we say a road engine, it's a road locomotive or a heavy haulage engine for pulling abnormal or indivisible loads that other things couldn't move. Skaters, press, even large ships for families. And this one worked for a company in Hull. It did spend a short time as a showman engine. It was converted back to a road engine. All of a tractor is just falling in the tractor. They're not actually a tractor, as we all know it, but they're used for hauling loads and taking guns or anything. Sometimes long distance, but mainly short distance. Sometimes they can be operated by one man. This one is operated by casters for Andover, and it's unusual for all other tractors. It's driven by a chain from all of the wheels to the back wheel. This was great sailing on friction, but also quite fast and very well extended on sprint. It's quite a comfortable ride, although there's not much space on the book. Following on from Northampton for Northampton, this was quite was Or having shaping angle. Sometimes it's quicker and easier to do it.
Now you see the four shows there with the coronation female. Between yours and Fifth. Several times.
Yeah, they got in their yard. They got green hoist. For many years was in the old gravel pit, which belonged to Edward, the showman, who also worked with the original scratch of the edges, but this was bought by Fred Simmons, who was many years of that in the Valley. I think it had a longer panel, and one of the first attractions there, I remember seeing become the cut under the wheel. And when it was muddy, it could move around and no one else could. Following that, old time. This is the old time is the one that started all of this off after when sitting in some one day and only knows it's not, and just invested down to the movement, and they had a race, and old timer was the victor. And I think for the next 2 or 3 years also, once the traction engine movement got sorted out, we decided that we wouldn't have races so much, more just a demonstration, and some of the ring events, tug of war, obstacle races, rangers, invitations, but old timer was the one that started it all. I think if I remember rightly, roughly into a registered, but I think Arthur got it because it was in his Wilders at Wallis, which is not that far away. Wilders were the local contractors in this area. I think the borough that went through earlier, the single compound, was also there. That was and following old timer is Arthur's other engine called Tommy. A beautiful thousand. In my memory, that's 6 agricultural thousands we have today, so we're very lucky. Tommy, maybe 1920, so an engine on springs and a wonderful agricultural engine. Professional commentators arrive now, I'll pass it over. Sorry about that, because otherwise it's late. But where we got to?
Tommy. Oh, right. Now, I'm going to use my notes for this job because what I particularly want to run through all the people who take on the tour. But he's old time at this point in time. They don't often happen, great granddaughter hearing me, not especially to the occasion. And I thank the Mark for making a start, certainly he's on the start of number 2. As you were saying, we've got quite a selection of lovely Fowler agriculturists here. Now the next one around, something very different indeed. We've got one of John Murphy's pair of engines, went new, showman up in Southfield. We've got Renown, it has a sister Repulse which looks pretty well identical in every respect. John Murphy didn't believe in twisted brass decorations. He just wanted amperage out of the dynamo to drive his ride. Because although we now treasure the engines and look upon them with great reverence almost, they were just the tools we were Johnson saying. And they certainly wouldn't have been functioning properly looking all glorious. They were just there to do a job, which they did. So as I say, that's one of the pair that he bought to power his ride. Now is actually owned by the Howard brothers. They're on an old playground as well. And he actually worked very hard on the playground until the outbreak of the Second War, when he worked in forestry actually. 1963 he was purchased by Ran Hawthorne. Now there's another name from the past, the old guard, as I like to gather them all together. Ran Hawthorne, he also had a roller called B&B, and his son is here with a little model tractor as well, which is here's Morning Star coming round now, number 29, John Derling. I'm trying to say Derling and Aveling all in one mouthful. It's an Aveling and Porter tractor. Again, just back. The paint is almost dry. It might be a bit sticky in places, but they've really been burning the midnight oil to get that back together. Had a major rebuild. Everything in the boiler replaced. New paintwork, we've done work on the motor, work on the back axle, new tyres. It's had the full treatment. And finally, repainted it with the correct Aveling green with the line. Always tell an Aveling, that's the one with the rampant horse on the front. That's followed by Richard Hazel's little Wallis tractor. Now, this is quite a rare beast. You won't find many Wallis tractors. They didn't build many engines anyway, Wallis Steevens, although we got a good selection here. And the tractor was quite a rare beast. Talking of Wallis Steevens, is not only here. We've got a special guest on the steering wheel, Alan Steevens, has joined us. Good to see you, Alan. Tony wasn't sure, Colin wasn't sure whether he was making or not, but we've been associated with this engine for many years. And it is actually for sale if you want to buy an engine. Tony Harrington, the last owner, sadly died in a very unfortunate accident. And his family have now decided that the engine can move on. It's 2 years now since with all church. But lovely engine, it's a very unique one, that particular one. It's a pleasure to see it here as it is. It was originally built for export actually, but didn't go on very wide back wheels. And then was rebuilt to standard if you like. And it was sold on in 1915 after the rebuilt in 14 and he went to work in the Swindon area. And then of course it was actually purchased in 1963 by Sam Lowe, which is where the connection comes with Steevens there. He saved the engines from the gravel pit. A number of engines went in the gravel pit, which is run by Edwards of Swindon, the Chetwynd, and it was recovered from there and rebuilt it here. John Dawn, lovely barrel 5-horse road loco, which has been with the Newton family for quite a while now. I don't know how long, but they rally quite a few engines in progress. One of their other engines is actually built at the moment. That was new in 1927, it's quite a late engine. And they bought that in exchange with part exchange with Darren Stafford, former engine. Similar size to the one in politics. So he travelled around the country, he went on the first in 1960 from Ron Greener, and then was acquired by the Newton family. That's followed by Defiance. This is, if you want to be very picky, it's the Sheldon's engine actually. The road's only a tractor, but he worked for many, many years hauling Sheldon Road. He was owned by Sheldon. So it's unusual in that he did at one time, I believe, carry a dynamo, like a box.
Was that you, Martin Sheldon?
It's private. But he's been with the Marker family since, I don't know when, the 1950s I was thinking. Must have attended some of the rallies here in its early days. Travelled very extensively. Lovely to see it appearing again. Now there's something at the other end of the scale. The big Fowler V6 was new to John Thompson, the Boilermakers. They only parted with it in the 1960s when it was purchased by Ned Crane, whose name it carries on the sideboard, still owned by his daughter Bridget, but it's now looked after by Tom Stevens. Very lucky man to have that to look after, and he makes a very good job of it. It normally carries the crane jib. Ned rarely took the crane off, but Tom understandably finds it a bit easier in life to leave the crane behind. But big, very powerful engine like Vodacere, capable of hauling massive loads. Thompson's using the course for delivering boilers. He was replaced by a Scamel, which he's managed to acquire as well, so he's got the engine and the Scamel. A couple of little Aveling tractors, barrel tractors coming along now. These very fast engines, they were often called the gold medal tractors because the RAC decided they would show the world how much better modern petrol engine trucks were than these old steam engines. So they organised the race. And the idea was they would have a barrel tractor as a sort of comparison to show the petrol tractors were so much better. Anyway, it all blew up in the face because the barrel beat all the modern trucks hands down. It was cheaper to run, more reliable, hauled more, and won in every respect. So through gritted teeth, they had to hand the gold medal to Burrell, who promptly renamed that model the gold medal tractor. The second one you can see is on its original straight wheel. This, of course, is how all engines were built up until the 1930s, before tarmac roads came in. When they were just stone roads, they would have these straight wheels. And they were very effective for the job. But of course, once the straights came in, we then got into trouble on the tarmac because you couldn't always get a grip. And on a very hot day like yesterday, somebody left quite a nice set of footprints along the road. Some big there as they travel up the rally. So it's getting a funny vibration along towards that. Organised sounded a bit like a mating elephant. Well, we've got an earlier sentinel wagon coming past it now. You'll see that's on solid wheels as they were. Later on the sentinels will often converted to pneumatic. And that's what's called a three-way tipper. So it's like a modern tipping lorry. Very good time. Very useful. Roller. Some of the rollers are taken to the early Appleford rallies because, of course, in the 1950s they were all still at work. They were not in the reservation in the early 1950s started to buy rollers to say that the late Ran Hawthorne who had renown as we're looking at earlier, he had a reserve roller in the boot to find him. That one, if you look very closely, you'll notice it's got a rubber coating on the back roll, like the front of the car. Makes it very much better on the road. It makes it more sure-footed, and also it's a bit more comfortable for the crew, because there's no friction on a roller like that. And normally, they don't have a differential. They normally would only drive through one roll. It makes it going up a very steep hill. Yes, sir. Last one, the other end of the scale, we've got one of the old original stalwarts, owned by Bill Tame, who was one of the old guard who we must mention. He bought Margaret, his friend Eric Fillmore bought Noreen, which was a very similar engine, albeit 2 years younger. And they were the first pair of working clarinets they were. He's 1870, so he's 155 years old. Still in full working order. And what a pleasure it is to plough with that. Somebody once said to me, listening to the engine when I was having the pleasure of driving, he said, it reminds me of a pannier track, trying to get the empty night sleeper out of the pannier. It really has quite a bark to it. Another little borough tractor there going past. Now, we've got a very interesting engine coming along now, the one that is the youngest flying engine, probably one of the youngest engines built, 1927. It looks a little bit like Margaret, but it's very different in lots of ways. Because Wilders and Wallis were then trading as Wilders and Bournemouth, they decided that they had a few bits of power in the line. An old power flying engine. So they modernised it. Different cylinder block, different motion, it has over 6 inches down here, and the transfer is different motion. And the brakes are very funny here. It's all the way like a naval engineer now. And the three wheels are going to not working all. Following that is another of the engines. This is an unladen power of EV1. These are very common engines. The ministry ordered 170 when was the first war. They issued the war island in the state, get more landing and observation. And a lot of these engines the engine because they were quite grassy drive, carry over half the mile. You have a pair of those, the left-hand one, pull the engine back and forward and now the roller going past there. You see the barrel, first column. More than half of the rollers in the line is very beautiful old world coast. The earlier ones always stood a bit taller, a bit harder, and still on bigger wheels. Some of the later ones were built with smaller wheels to gear them down, to enable them to pull more bigger loads. It carries the name of William Thurston, very well known name in the Shoreland world, still in business. Little Wallis Steevens name coming along. I might have thought faster of Wallis earlier. As I came in the box, I was looking at the back side of it and intrigued. That's my defence. Anyway, here's Little Atom. Say, Wallis and Steevens, quite a rare beast of tractors. There weren't many of them. I'm not sure whether that's officially a tractor. It might be a classed as a 5 horsepower. I'll have to write up its notes and have a look. The Garrett 4CD coming along now. Owned by the Benson family or Burberry family, I'm not quite sure. Burberry's sure one family anyway as far as I'm concerned. Bought by Mrs. Benson, the matriarch of the family, way back, and she rented it to the family business. So it remained her own until the parents were a little bit down to the same speed as the Aveling tractor that's following. You'll notice on the right-hand side of that Aveling, beautifully polished bell, sounds like the old tram. That was the audible warning of approach. You didn't have a whistle, whistle off. Well, this Aveling Volkswagen, converted to pneumatics later in life, carries the name of Robin Greenway, been with the family for many years. Just coming back from quite a major rebuild. They did the boiler, first year, just a bare shaft and foreman. It's got the body now, it's still much together. Marshall, Union Marshall Agricultural, I think I'm right in saying it's the only Marshall compound agricultural that survived. Am I right? Yeah, I am. But synonymous with another of the old guard, John Placer, who was very well known in the preservation movement. Still looked after it. You'll see it has a DD registration farm section for Gloucestershire. It's due to Henry Cole, the coal merchant. It's still in business today. 5 horsepower. Now, some people call this a road loader. It's not a road loader. It's actually agricultural, build a string, belly tank, and a third speed. So it's not as fast as the road loader on the one string. In the build sheet, which I have seen, because that engine was installed by the gentleman who taught me a lot about steam, John Crowther, from Preston, Yorkshire. And he bought that off Richard Wilcox. Again, another early pioneer of steam. Richard is still with us, I'm not sure whether he's still attending this event. big pizza rollers are called. Don't come from hybrid medicine and process. One company had over 100 rollers. They would quote out for the position of rolling service. So they would send the roller to Edinburgh, Glasgow, Aberdeen, Penzance, wherever they want the contract. It would go quite possibly they'd hire a driver mostly, or they may send the driver with it. It's all on the train. The drivers live it round the train. He would live with his roller. If you look around the field, we've got a selection. Told them a family of two children were there. Very popular with the great rival settler which followed. They stuck together. Boiler in the town between the driver and fireman. Very cosy on a wet day, not ideal for posing in a rally like this. Margaret, we looked at the garage tractor earlier. This is one fitted up with the solar fitting, fitted with a dynamo, twisted grass, all the gizmos. The Apprentice Club is the youth arm of the National Track Station Club. They have big representation in the house. If you have a child who'd like to get involved with engines, that's the way to go. Because they won't put the way to do it. Children's brain. We need to get the youngsters involved because they're the future. Without them, who will look after these engines in years to come? You look at Margaret, she's 165 years old. She's already been through umpteen illness. And she's still going strong, and there's a young gang on there. George, who's had to stay at home doing duty and season, drives that engine very much. No, we've got probably one of the oldest trains in the field. It's certainly the oldest in the field. Probably on the horse to it. One of their engines. The one to our landlord. The farmer who runs this town. Lovely to see it. It's a very old-fashioned design of engine. Although it's not actually the oldest one. We've got a little barrel, there's a lot of miniature engines here. If you don't understand how an engine works, if you like to learn more, don't find an engine because the owner or driver won't be far away because they're like babies, you can't do this for long. And they'll be happy to explain to you how it works. They're just the same as a full size, and a lot of them are very accurate and possible. Look for all the world like a horse, tractor, 4 businesses, not one. So, yes, it's something to talk about. Go and have a look at what's going on. Is very often used in the formation. Greenway is often involved in demonstrations. And you'll notice on this outside of the engine, on the left side of the belly tank has been cut off. It's cut short so that the belt can come down and go onto the nose right for the formation. We've got a full width belly tank. The belt will run on the top of the belly tank. try the rock run over that by putting an orange hat on the belly left or putting a pivot to round up the Can you hear me on both engines? Yeah. Right, gentlemen, hands on regulators, are we ready? On your marks, get set, go! Sorry Mark, there's been a revolution. We tend to don't do any real racing. Just remember, I want the commentary box for tomorrow. first stage privilege of belongs to King George, who's standing over the far side of the ring there, who join us later, I'm sure. Wonderful day. Now, the very first children's engines to appear in the rally, they're carrying the name of the Coronation Speedway, Lady Andrews ride. She started life as a thrashing engine, actually, down in Devon. Went back to Burroughs, I believe, talked to the man at the bakery, and he was then sold to Hickey's, the Boilermakers in London, and became City of London, one of Hickey's 3 engines. And when it was recently rebuilt, there were lots of photos of it as City of London, and John rebuilt it to the exact pictures of City of London. But anyway, he's put it back to King George to appear here because it was the first showman's engine to attend an Appleford rally. I think it's about 1954, 55, somewhere there. It's all in the programme, all the details, so buy a programme if you haven't worn, they're only a couple of quid. And you can find out how many mistakes I've made as I walk along. So that was very much part of the engines that would have been at the early Appleford event. There's Eileen going around again. The lovely Burrow that's gone past. You see that engine there. That is official Burrow paint scheme, Quaker green with chocolate wheels. And the lining on the engine was always done. Each manufacturer had their own particular style of lining. You see a Fowler that's in the original paint, it will have a thick black line followed by a red line and a yellow line. One's an 8-foot inch wide, the other's 16 wide. Patricia has never had lining on for a long time, and it's always immaculately clean. Been with the Fenton/Burberry family for many years. This is P.C. Fenton, the matriarch of the family many, many years back, bought the engine and then leased it to the family business. There's the little Burroughs road haulage tractor again. That beam, it couldn't be driven by one man, but it was practical to have two, because if you're on the move, if you're on your own, you've got to stop and fire up. You don't want to turn your back on where you're going. Start filling your shovel. Away from me, you've got the engine there with no canopy on. That's Ancient Hall. Again, an engine that was early associated with this event. It was new to a company, I can't think of his name now, but it then went to Ancient Hall, where the chief engineer at the estate was Albert Walton, the grandson of the present owner. When he retired, it was bought by Albert's son Jack, who was a great member of the early preservation movement, which has since passed on to John. So, nice little market which, say, all of these engines actually that we've got at the moment are associated with the early Appleford, the early preservation movement. There's little boat, as I say, the new Aston brothers, they were killed the most, and rolled into preservation. Really loud. Say, rallied for many years by Gordon Howell. It's one of the few engines you can drive sitting down, and of course it's got full electric lights on as well, which is quite useful when you're out in the dark. Now we've got a very different style of engine coming along now. We've got the Burrell, which I mentioned earlier, and it's a single track compound. So it's got two cylinders, but only one big end. So for those of you that are knowledgeable, you can see that you've got the simplicity of the single cylinder engine, but the economy of the compound. That's why the cylinders are set one above the other. Well, they're not directly above each other, but if you look at the little round disc behind the chimney, you can see how the cylinders are arranged. A normal compound engine has the two cylinders side by side, like this little Wallis just coming. But he's going to creep down the inside, I think. So you might want to have a look at that. The Burrell roller adapted in, of course, is a single cylinder. Right, we're getting lined up for a bit of activity. I'm not sure what's happening. Looks like the next race, I think. So we've got the little Wallis here, the Garrett in the middle. Probably I would think we're going to have a Burrell on the far side. Now, it's of course worth remembering that this is not a fair fight, in the sense that some engines were designed for haulage, and were geared accordingly. Some were designed for lighter loads, fast running when empty. The Burrell has 3 speeds, for example, so in top gear it goes very quick but won't pull much. If you want to pull a decent load with it, you've got to work in middle gear. Now the Garrett standing alongside it, its top gear, which it's only got 2 to choose from, is probably not dissimilar in speed to the Burrell in middle gear. So the Garrett starts at a disadvantage, but what we ought to do is race with a 12-ton trailer behind each engine. That will even the odds up rather nicely. But of course some engines were like something moving, say, furniture van with a little Burrell would be quite appreciative of the speed, so they might be going one way, they wouldn't be pulling back weight. The Garrett in the middle there with his blue roof worked for all its life on timber, and they would never go back to the mill with half a load. So he would be pulling a timber trolley mile high with a big job. Right, well we've got, let me have a peep out. Right, we've got 2 Burrells, one at each end. It's going to be quite exciting, especially. Big Jones end, just having a little stretch of the legs, Britannia, carrying the name of William Thurston, who still are well-known showground proprietors. So right, we've got the first photo call
to Clyde. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to get to your engines. You'll have a countdown and I want every whistle going. Now Maggie, as you've been told, is 1887. She's the oldest of 6 survivors in steam. There is another one being repaired in Tasmania. She never left these shores. She was their show engine. Although we look after her, Clive and the family have spent many hundreds and thousands of pounds to present her as she left the factory. She's still running on her original boiler barrel, which says something for the steel of yesteryear. Clive and Alison went to many events throughout the years. Unfortunately, illness curtailed that, and my son Ben, Jamie, the other mechanic, and myself, we take great pleasure and great pride in being able to show the Hartwright family's pair of engines. Now, if everyone's on their engine, I'll count down from 5, and at every whistle go, please, for as long as you like. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, let it go! Clive and Alison, as a movement, we salute you.
unusual things on the ground. After the check drive tractor, most of the engines are all the way down. After we hand over, another 1 miles from here, one of the companies that has five steamers are picking up the trucks, low-loaded trailer at one time. Then they were bought out by one of the biggest trailer manufacturers. Between the poles, then use the engine wing to lift. It's a very heavy riding car, on and off the ride. The engine will stand 6 foot movement.